It is time now for Perspectives with Asima Silva, and as always, we are coming to you from the studios of WCCA TV on Main Street in Worcester, Massachusetts. And today, via Zoom, we're going to be heading outside of New England. As we like to say here in Massachusetts, we've got somebody for you who is wicked smart, and they're going to be coming up and talking to us about what it is that they do, and their background as a chemical engineer. Asima plays a part in this, but this is really about entrepreneurial women. This is about people who are making a difference in the world, who are setting out to truly inspire and make a difference in the world. And as you're going to tell us a little bit about a recent event that our guest was involved in.
Right. So thank you for joining us, and as always, we look forward to giving you the perspective of different people who can motivate us and inspire us in all the work that they're doing. And I came across this particular woman, a woman who is a social entrepreneur, doing great work. She is a chemical engineer tackling the problem of carbon emissions. And I will not try to explain all of this stuff to you. I'll let her explain it. So let me introduce you to Nihad Kaiseruddin, who is joining us from the suburbs of Philadelphia. So thank you, Nihad, for joining us today. If you don't mind, can you give us a background of what this problem is? And of course, I'm going to ask after that, how did you get involved and what your part in this, all of this is?
Thank you so much for having me. That's a pleasure to be here. So as we're tackling this problem of climate change, and as things are just getting worse, and we're looking for solutions in reducing zero emissions, carbon emissions. And when we're going through this pandemic around the world, countries are trying to come up with their plans in how they're going to tackle this problem of climate change, of carbon emissions. So at PDC Machines, our role is, PDC Machines, we build compressors and we pump gases to very high pressures in very pure form. So these gases can be used in the medical field, in the pharmaceutical field, in the food industry. And one of the ways, one of our main parts of our business right now is to pump hydrogen to high pressures to be used as fuel into zero emission vehicles.
Wow. All right, so that really is going to be a game changer. We've been talking about this now for decades here in America, it seems, although obviously you're taking it to a new level. What happens when we start to get to those zero emissions? This is to help with global warming. I sadly heard some scientists say we've already kind of missed the boat on really being able to change where we're headed in the future. But how will this help our environment?
Yeah, so one of the main carbon emissions sources that we're faced with is from vehicles, whether it's cars, buses, not forklifts, but cars, buses, trains, anything that transports people and stuff is what we say. So right now you'll see, we normally fuel using gasoline, and one alternative, zero emission alternative we do see is electric vehicles, where you're plugging in, charging, and able to go for a distance. But what we see is that electric vehicles aren't 100% of the solution. There are restrictions to the distances and the size of the vehicle. So there needs to be more alternatives. So hydrogen fuel is one of those alternatives that have a lot of benefits. It can use, it had actually turned, so one of the ways of producing hydrogen, why hydrogen is such a great, solution is that there's many sources of hydrogen. One of them is water. And this is, we make a product where you just plug in water and electricity, just like you would a refrigerator, and it produces fuel that you could fuel a car. And so that's a very pure, you put in water and it spits out water. So that's a very pure form of producing hydrogen. But another way is that's very popular is methane methane reformation. And that's where you can take food waste or animal waste, and normally these things will produce toxins in the air. So we can actually take that waste and pull out the hydrogen from it and use it, and that reduces the amount of emissions on the source end, and then also using it to fuel cars, which zero emission cars. So it's a double benefit.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think this sort of begs the question then with this capability, and here we are, we're in Worcester, it's the second largest city in New England. We have very few of these EV refueling stations, so I'm not even sure how people who have invested in their electric cars to help the environment, I'm not sure how effective it is. I mean, I think we would, if we saw more of those stations, I think we would have more people doing that. But when it comes to hydrogen, how much of this then is just political, that we don't have more of this being done? Is it the technology, or is it more that we are so dependent on fossil fuels and the fossil fuel industry that there's just a powerful lobby that doesn't want you to be able to do what it is that you're talking about doing?
Yeah, those are excellent points and very much on point. So one of the issues is the infrastructure of charging stations, and also the availability of vehicles. So a lot of times, what comes first, the chicken or the egg type of thing. So different countries have approached it in different ways. Some have produced more cars than stations, and that's what we see in California right now. There is a lack of stations. They're in the process of building more. And then there are other countries where have more stations than cars, and so their stations are being underutilized. So government politics is a big part of it, and part of what we do at PDC is, in addition to selling compressors, we do reach out to politicians and educate them on hydrogen so they can make educated decisions on the legislative side. There are, there's a plan to build a hydrogen corridor down the northeast side of, the northeast side of the states, but not Pennsylvania, because it's such a cold state. So it's really hard to get in. So we're really trying to. So that's one of the examples of the challenges we're having. For as far as government subsidies, this will be a major boost in helping the infrastructure. It's really needed to build those stations. There is a station in I think it's called Somerville, Massachusetts. It's our simple fuel unit there. And there's one in DC. So there's a couple coming up, but as far as the large stations, that's in the works.
Well, I'm more curious about, you're saying this requires water. I mean, we hear a lot of stories about how we're going to have water shortage in the future. What kind of water does this require? Because if we're talking about possible water shortage in the future, how does this kind of technology help our community?
Yes, that's a great question. It does require clean water. And electrolysis, or using water and electricity to make hydrogen, is not the most popular way. It is just the greenest way. And as far as how much water I'm talking about, it takes maybe a gallon to fuel a car. It's very little. It's very efficient. So it's not like we're taking gallons and gallons. It's very efficient.
So this seems like an important point then. So it isn't just that it is green and, oh boy, aren't we being good, wonderful people. This is not only a cleaner energy source, but it sounds to me like the technology would make it less expensive for me to fuel my car eventually.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that is with the lower energy costs and the renewables. It takes time though, because it is new technology. And so right now you could only lease a car from California. We have our own hydrogen station at PDC, but we had to ship it in from California, the car that we leased. And that's because, one, they didn't, they know there's no infrastructure here. And two, that's the way they kind of, they manage, right now in the States, we manage hydrogen in kilograms. That's the way, it takes 5 kilograms to fill a car, for example. And so how do you charge that? That's still a question they're trying to figure out. How do you tax that? So these are things in the States that we do have to figure out. Right now, it's private stations that are, I actually drove from our station in Warminster, Pennsylvania, and to Boston, and I stopped at 2 stations just to make sure that I had enough fuel, and they had different ways of. One made its own hydrogen at the site, and another way is you fill these 2 trailers of hydrogen and then bring it to the station and fuel from there. So they're trying to figure out
my question when you said about waste. My question was going to be: are we going to have these warehouses of waste collection, where then they store and produce this hydrogen and then ship it out to the various sites that require it to fuel up? I'm just wondering, or like each fueling station has its own warehouse of waste that they use. How is that being envisioned? Because this is a whole new side of manure that I never thought of. I know that sounds ridiculous to say, but
we got plenty of it. Vermont all of a sudden is like sitting on a gold mine.
Yeah. I'm just trying to envision what is the process and the logistics of how this would work.
Right. On the hydrogen production side, that's honestly not our technology, but what I have seen our customers do is they usually have something in place that they're using already. So maybe that's at the site of the farm. That's what I've seen as one example when you're using manure is the reformer is at the farm. So the source is already there. They're not moving it. They're not stockpiling it. The stockpiling is already there. It's our problem right now. So it's actually a solution to put a reformer there and produce hydrogen from it.
You had talked, Asima, about this event and woman entrepreneurs and the innovation, and I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. I unfortunately was not able to attend that event, but since I knew about it is why I invited their guests to speak on our show. Would you kind of enlighten us about what was the motivation of getting that event going and why you were chosen as one of them to speak at that event?
Yeah, I was just honored. I honestly feel honored to be able to have my job be something that's affecting, that's helping tackle this issue of climate change. So I just feel like it's a blessing in how God's using me right now. It's a main part of our business. I don't know what else
part
to
of
say
this
about that. As far as why I was chosen, but I think it's just to learn about hydrogen energy, to say that this is something that's happening within, specifically the Muslim community. It is a Muslim-owned business.
Right. I was going to say this was an event in which this was 3 Muslim women, so I did want to
were entrepreneurs and doing amazing work in terms of our society and in terms of giving back to our society and the work that they're doing. So that's the curious part. So what is your company composed of? You said it's a Muslim, started company. How big is it? How many people do you have in it? Is it all still Muslim, or is it kind of diversing?
Oh, so it started out, the founder is an immigrant from India, and Syed Afzal, and he came on to American scholarship to Princeton University, started out of his garage with the help and support of his wife, who answered phones and kept the kids quiet in the background. And, so it started very modestly, in consulting. And he sold his first compressors in the early 80s. And then, Syed Afzal is actually my father-in-law. And he, when I got married in 1999, the company had about 20 to 25 people. And now we're over 100 people, including 4 international offices, 3 in Asia and 1 in Europe. So it is growing, and it grew so quickly because of the hydrogen energy, because countries are scrambling to use this technology in as a solution.
So you're saying he identified this issue back in the 80s?
No, it started out manufacturing, in the manufacturing industry. So filling cylinders for example, helium for tanks, for balloons, is one example. And just from there, in 1999, actually the year I got married, there were these demo projects around the world, and to see how to use hydrogen or fuel cells in mobility. So how to use hydrogen fuels, gas to fuel forklifts and buses and cars, specifically at that time. It wasn't until 2015, 16 years later, that these demo projects turned to commercialization, and you started seeing these stations actually being built and used. So it wasn't that PDC was the one who pushed this initiative. This is out of a need, and it's just a good solution that people are using. And PDC had the right compressor component. It's the main part. It's the main piece of equipment that's needed for this kind of process, and or a large part of it. And so we're blessed to get in there early and have a good, I think part of the blessing is that we have a good product. We have that's rooted in good morals, meaning we never grow. One of the core values is not to grow in debt. So never to spend money that wasn't in hand. And another is to support local businesses, hire veterans. So while it was founded by a Muslim, it's a very diverse group of employees.
Well,
political thought, in ethnicity, and everything.
Yeah, I mean, this is a American dream, American success story, right? I mean, you have a better idea, you have a moral compass, a moral center, you give back to the community, you hire from within that community. It is your hard work and long hours, it is the power of your ideas, and then it begins to pay off. This last year, of course, has been a year, 12 months has been like no other with the pandemic and the lockdown. Help or hurt, or what impact did the pandemic have on what you're doing?
I think it helped a lot, especially with seeing the effects of using less vehicles on the road. So there's less carbon emissions. Especially, I hear stories in Delhi that there's less smog. There's less smog everywhere in China and in India. So they're seeing the actual effects of reducing the carbon emissions. So I think in that sense it helped. We were blessed never to shut down. We were considered an essential business because a lot of forklifts and warehouses are fueled by hydrogen. So you can't get your Amazon packages without them, for example. And why hydrogen for forklifts specifically is a good solution is because, one, you can't have regular fuel in warehouses, so they tend to use batteries, and these batteries are heavy, they take long to charge, and they slow down during a shift, as the charge reduces. So they're finding that hydrogen keeps the same speed throughout their shift, and it's quick to refuel. There's no heavy parts to move around, so they turned out to be the best solution for them. So you see them in Amazon, Walmart, Home Depot, all these places. So we're just slammed right now, honestly. It's such a, thank God for it, but it is growing very rapidly.
Isn't that interesting? So the pandemic
helped.
Right, exactly. I just throw this out because I just thought it was an interesting tidbit that I saw the other day. It is true, obviously, that we have these lower emissions now, that we can actually see this around the world, and you would think that hopefully that would inspire people. So the earth got quieter over the last 12 months. We weren't apparently vibrating as much. Boston, which is the #1 most congested city in America for traffic, the previous 2 years, traffic fell during rush hour 68%. So now we're only the 4th most congested city for rush hour.
We fell from 1 to 4.
and yet we dropped 68%, which shows you just how exactly congested we are. You talked about some other cities like New Delhi or whatever. I mean, there are cities, Bogota, by the way, apparently is like #1. But you talk about these cities and the amount of traffic and people who are just sitting in traffic. And even with the last 12 months, even with it dropping, there's still a lot of traffic that is out there in the world.
So I have a question, because whenever we hear about solutions, there's always disadvantages to each solution. So we talked about the advantages of this kind of fueling. What are the disadvantages?
Yeah, so some of the greatest challenges are the structure, building it. Right now there are none, so it will take time. So that is one of the big disadvantages that we're at right now. There are times that hydrogen, that battery, we say that it's part of the solution. It's not the entire solution. Sometimes, the battery charged vehicles might be better for like short commuter type applications. That would be fine for hydrogen as well. But there are certain things that battery operated would not work, such as forklifts, such as longer distances or heavier vehicles. And for hydrogen, aside from the infrastructure, the cost, it's a new technology. So it'll take time for that cost to come down as it becomes a more regular part of our society. So these are some, and we talked about the political challenges. So there are some of those disadvantages.
What was the reception for yourself, the other Muslim women? What is the feedback that you have been getting, and how may that determine where the future of this goes?
Oh, so very recently, this just came to mind, so I'm going to share it. So just recently, we signed a sustainability partnership with the Philadelphia Eagles, the football team. And they are the very first professional sports team to use hydrogen energy. And right after that, the press release came out, we started getting other sports teams started reaching out to us saying, we want to see how it turns out for the Eagles, and if it's well, we want one too. So just getting the word out there, getting it to be getting people to understand, to be educated on it. Many people had never heard about hydrogen as fuel, so just getting the word out there that this exists, this is coming, and so keep your eye out and get familiar with it so that you can be ready to jump in. One of the other challenges that I'll say for these zero emission vehicles, I know I'm stepping back, but that it's the range anxiety. Until the infrastructure is there, it might be more fleet vehicles or more, like I said, warehouses for forklifts or people commuting short term. But in the long-term process, it is a part of the solution.
Well, I guess that's where the Eagles especially might come in. I mean, you need some true believers early on. You need some people who are going to do it because they believe in the future or they believe in clean energy, as opposed to what's the cheapest way for me to get around right now.
Yes, and I'll use my husband as a great example because he does get plug-in vehicles. And at first it was, just 60 miles. He only would get 60 miles. So I would call it a wind-up car. And then, I would joke around saying, you're plugging it into the house and it's like basically coal operated until we got solar panels. So, okay, now it's a green car, So some of the things but now, of course, the range has come from 60 to 250 miles. And sometimes if you're driving long distances, you have to find where those charging stations are. So it's getting to, we see as the electric vehicles are growing, those charging stations, they're growing, they're available at the airport at different parking spots. So that's similar with, as I see with hydrogen, if we're proactive and it gets established well, then you do need those early dreamers or people who have faith in it or are willing to take that, experiment and run with it. So it's very helpful.
I think this, it's amazing. I just want to see how this company progresses.
I agree. I mean, here's the thing, and of course it does start to come down to cost. I do think, though, that there is another generation that is coming up, and I think some of this is generational. For someone like me, I mean, it's just, it's hard, or my generation, I guess I should say, me always forward thinking. But I think that, it's hard for us to break away because, I mean, I just grew up with what's the price of gas? Look at the price of gas. Gee, it's too high. Gee, isn't that great? I'm getting a deal. And we're just so tied to that's the way that it is. I just think that we are slow to change. But I think you can feel out there in America, that change is coming with a new generation.
But I also think it's reliability because we know right now that when we put oil in our car, we can get we were just talking about X number of miles, and we know that it works, and it's, gas stations are everywhere. I think it's a little bit of the reliability too that we're going to have to see and watch in the future. But I really want to please keep us updated on how this company progresses, and maybe if you need investors or when you hit the stock market, we could be the first
there you
people
go.
to get in.
Exactly.
Talk about change. You'll be great with change with that one, Hank.
Yeah, we'll get our Reddit thread going.
Well, hopefully the Tokyo Olympics happens, and in the athlete village, they have a hydrogen station for buses to run in the athlete village, and our compressor is running those too. So maybe we'll get classes.
That's great.
Well, Asima, as you wrap up, maybe one more time, how do we follow along? How do we keep up with what's happening with the company?
Sure. So we are on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're also at pdcmachines.com.
That's excellent. Just to wrap up this show, I wanted to thank our guest, Nihad, for joining us today. I hope you learned a lot. I certainly did. And talk about the American dream, identifying an issue, giving back to the community, starting a business. And I'm just looking forward to seeing this in the future, a lot more of it. Thank you for joining us, and join us again at Perspectives with Asima Silva.